head of Boston Latin School, I would like to welcome much of the student body, faculty, staff, family, friends, and alumni of the Boston Latin School community to this quarter's public declamation. Public declamation has a long and rich history here at Boston Latin School. As part of the early classical curriculum in the colonial days, the tradition, lost over time, was revived in the mid-1800s and has been in place ever since. Typically, 4 times each year, students compete to earn spots to perform before their peers in the assembly hall. Due to the pandemic, we have decided to host 3 remote declamation performances, pre-recorded and streamed for your enjoyment. Towards the end of the year, we usually have prize declamation, which takes place in early May during reunion weekend, where qualifying students perform before judges of the 25th and 50th reunion classes. We will still be conducting prize declamation this year, but it will be a little different, and so we ask that you stay tuned until the very end of the year to watch that performance. Now, you are about to be entertained, inspired, moved, and educated by the select performers today. Nearly a month ago, approximately 20 students tried out during a Friday Flex period, and 10 have been invited to perform for you today. These 10 students are a great demonstration of what declamation is all about, and I know that you'll enjoy their performances. Nearly for a month, they've been preparing as well, and I know that many of you are familiar with the preparation involved, such as the selection of the piece, the gleaning of words, phrases, and lines for the main idea, the memorization, the practice and rehearsal, and finally, the courage one must muster to recite to the best of their ability the words, thoughts, and feelings of great writers. As I know that you're quite aware of this preparation, I expect that you show the same level of respect that you wish to be granted to you. Therefore, our participation today requires us to listen, pay attention, and understand the words the declaimers share with us. Please demonstrate the same level of respect and consideration for all of those factors. And finally, I have one last comment to share about the acknowledgement and applause that we usually show all of our performers at the end of the performance in the assembly hall when I ask for all contestants to come back on stage. Given this remote environment, it would be rather hard to do that. So I encourage you to find a creative way to show appreciation to the 10 students for their efforts, as I know many of us in the BLS community can and always do. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy today's assembly.
Good morning. My name is Oriana Dunker, and today I will be declaiming an excerpt of the poem Boston Ode by Portia Olaiwola. Portia Olaiwola, an LGBTQ+ Black woman currently residing in Boston, Massachusetts, is the Boston Poet Laureate and often shares her work through slam poetry. In this poem, written in 2019, Olaiwola discusses the essence and honest truth of the city of Boston by encouraging us to reflect on all parts of the city and its past, including the legacy of colonization and industrialization and the ongoing gentrification of our neighborhoods. She describes Boston's charm and its shortcomings through her words on the city's history, its people, and the good it uniquely offers. And now, Boston Ode. Can you name a love without rigor? Without sweet ache and stretch and sunshine and sweat? Boston, parent of our hallowed America, someone else's God before the land was conquered. Not the city we are born of, but it is a charitable home. The same way the city upon a hill gave birth to a country, and we are all now inside a nation and unbelonging at once. There is not a love I can fathom, with neither push nor pull, with neither grit nor sorrow nor glory raining out the other end. What is a home, then, if unhinged and locked? Beloved city, gemmed with bodegas on its corners, each studded with a cat guarding the front stoop. Gracious current, ringing the rush of the river, the calm of the pond, and the guilt of the ocean, hushing secrets along Dorchester's shores. Beantown, the best to keep the kept, Slades on Tremont and Bintus in Rosendale. Home is the booth we plop into, the cafe where the cashier craft meals that fill us. Dear city, Southwest corridor thumbing from the subway racing against air, patron saint of travelers, plague of trolleys, hold us still at lights. Unlearn us bustle and hand us patience. Memorandum to slow. Remind us who it is we are and the blood love it took to raise us. City of building blocks, place of clean water, of culture shaping, of planting and planning, tri-hilled city, tip the cup of tea and bring on the massacre. City of building up, 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 and people out, out, out. City of ramming, city of running, of shifting, pacing, fast, gone. Champion of all, parade for everything.
Good morning. My name is Eileen Shaw, and today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's commencement speech to the class of 2015 at Wellesley College, a women's college. In her speech, Adichie explains that many people are often blinded by their privilege and urges the audience not to do so. She also advises her audience to challenge societal norms about women. As I declaim, think of how you can promote gender equality around you as well. And now an excerpt from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's commencement speech. I already knew that the world does not extend to women, the many small courtesies that it extends to men. I also knew that victimhood is not a virtue, that being discriminated against does not make you somehow morally better. And I knew that men were not inherently bad or evil. They were merely privileged. And I knew that privilege blinds because it is the nature of privilege to blind. I knew this from personal experience, from the class privilege I had of growing up in an educated family, that it sometimes blinded me, that I was not always as alert to the nuances of people who were different from me. And you, because you now have your beautiful degree, have become privileged, no matter what your background. That degree and the experience of being here is a privilege. Don't let it blind you too often. Sometimes you will need to push it aside in order to see clearly. This school will open doors for you. Walk through those doors and make your strides long and firm and sure. Write television shows in which female strength is not depicted as remarkable, but merely normal. Teach your students to see that vulnerability is a human rather than a female trait. Hire more women where there are few. But remember that a woman you hire doesn't have to be exceptionally good. Like a majority of the men who get hired, she just needs to be good enough. And finally, I would like to end with a final note on the most important thing in the world: love. Now, girls are often raised to see love only as giving. Women are praised for their love when that love is an act of giving. But to love is to give and to take. Please love by giving and by taking. Give and be given. If you're only giving and not taking, you'll know. You'll know from that small and true voice inside you that we females are so often socialized to silence. Don't silence that voice. Dare to take. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jessie Wong, and today I will declaim Worms by Carl Dennis. This piece was published in the May issue of Poetry magazine. Carl Dennis is known for his quiet intellect and wisdom, and in this poem he describes the importance of gratitude, primarily towards those who do not seek it. Especially during these turbulent times, appreciating the people and things that are commonly taken for granted and recognizing their significance may allow us to truly open our eyes. While you listen to this piece, I encourage you to think about the sacrifices that were made so that the world could be the place it is today. Here is Carl Dennis's Worms. Aren't you glad, at least, that the earthworms under the grass are ignorant as they eat the earth? Of the good they confer on us, that their silence isn't a silent reproof for our bad manners? Our never casting earthward a crumb of thanks, for their keeping the soil from packing so tight that no root, however determined, could pierce it? Imagine if they suspected how much we owe them, how the weight of our debt would crush us. Even if they enjoyed keeping the grass alive, the garden flowers and vegetables, the clover, and wanted nothing that we could give them, not even the merest nod of acknowledgement. A debt to angels would be easy in comparison. Bright, weightless creatures of cloud will serve an even brighter and lighter master. Lucky for us, they don't know what they're doing. These puny, anonymous creatures of dark and damp who eat simply to live, with no more sense of mission than nature feels for providing our survival. Better save our gratitude for a friend who gives us more than we could give in return and never hints she's waiting for reciprocity. If I had a nickel, I'd give it to you, the lover says, who, having nothing available in the solid, indicative world, scrapes up a coin or two in the world of the subjunctive. A nickel with a hole drilled in the top, so you can fasten it to your bracelet, a charm to protect you against your enemies. For his sake, she'll wear it, not for her own. So he might believe she's safe as she saunters home across the field at night, the moon above her. Below her, the loam, compressed by the soles of her loafers, and the tunneling earthworms, tireless, silent, as they persist, oblivious in their service.
Good morning. My name is Mirabelle Berman Reinhardt, and I am in Class 3. In 2010, Michelle Alexander published her book, The New Jim Crow, in which she explored the targeting of black men in the war on drugs and how millions of African Americans are locked behind bars for the smallest of drug crimes and then forced into a permanent second-class status, denied the very rights supposedly won in the civil rights movement. In this excerpt, she tells the story of one of many African American women affected by the war on drugs, and addresses our misconceptions about the criminal justice system. As our government continues to operate behind the veil of colorblindness, Alexander punctuates the importance of placing mass incarceration at the forefront of the movement for racial justice in America. Now, an excerpt from The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Imagine you are Emma Faye Stewart, a 30-year-old single African-American mother of two who was arrested as part of a drug sweep in Hearne, Texas. All but one of the people arrested were African-American. You are innocent. After almost a month in jail, you decide to plead guilty so you can return home to your children. Unwilling to risk a trial and years of imprisonment, you are sentenced to 10 years probation and ordered to pay $1,000 in fines as well as court and probation costs. You are also now branded a drug felon. You are no longer eligible for food stamps. You may be discriminated against in employment. You cannot vote for at least 12 years, and you are about to be evicted from public housing. Once homeless, your children will be taken away from you and put in foster care. At trial, the judge finds that the entire sweep was based on the testimony of a single informant who lied to the prosecution. You, however, are still a drug felon, homeless, and desperate to regain custody of your children. This is the war on drugs. We may think we know how the criminal justice system works. Television is overloaded with fictional dramas about police, crime, and prosecutors. Shows such as Law and Order. A charismatic police officer struggles with his own demons while heroically trying to solve a horrible crime. He ultimately achieves a moral and personal victory by finding the bad guy and throwing him in jail. That is the made-for-TV version of the criminal justice system. It perpetuates the myth that the primary function of the system is to keep our streets safe and our homes secure by rooting out the dangerous criminals and punishing them. These television shows are the modern-day equivalent of the old movies portraying happy slaves. The fictional gloss placed on a brutal system of racialized oppression and control. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Selena Tang, and today I'll be declaiming an excerpt from Kanwen Shu's I Am Not Your Asian Stereotype. Kanwen begins her piece by describing herself, such as being a violinist and pianist, as well as wanting to become a doctor, later revealing that she was just listing stereotypes about Asians. These seemingly harmless stereotypes and jokes actually contribute to and are reflective of far deeper systemic issues. These have now manifested themselves in the form of hate crimes against Asian Americans. As we respond to these recent attacks, it is critical that we acknowledge that these are not isolated incidents, and we need to address the underlying causes and effects. With that, an excerpt from I Am Not Your Asian Stereotype. Used to being the only Asian in the room, I was self-conscious that the first thing people noticed about me was that I wasn't white. And as a child, I quickly began to realize that I essentially had two options in front of me. Conform to the stereotype that was expected, or conform to the whiteness that surrounded. There was no in-between. For me, it meant that I was always self-conscious about being good at math, because people would always say it was just because I was Asian, and not because I actually worked hard. It meant that when a boy asked me out, people automatically assume he had the yellow fever, and not that he actually liked me. It meant that my identity had formed around the fact that I was different. And for the longest time, I believed that being Asian was the only thing special about me. The truth is, Asian Americans play a strange role in the American melting pot. We are the model minority. Society uses our success to pit us against other people of color as justification that discrimination doesn't exist. But what does this mean for us Asian Americans? It means that we aren't similar enough to be accepted, but we aren't different enough to be loathed. We are in a perpetually gray zone, and society isn't quite sure what to do with us. So they group us by our culture and appearance. They tell us that we must reject our own heritages so that we can fit in with the crowd. They tell us that our foreignness is the only defining characteristic of us. They strip away our identities one by one until we are foreign, but not quite foreign, American, but not quite American, individual, but only when there are no other people from our native country around. There are still so many things I don't know about the world. But what I do know is that I am proud of who I am. A little bit American, a little bit Chinese, and a whole lot of both. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alex Chow. Never Let Me Go, a science fiction novel written by Kazuo Ishiguro in 2005, explores a dystopian society in which clones are raised for the sole purpose of donating their organs. In this excerpt of the novel, the narrator Kathy recollects the moment when she realizes others' internalized fear of donors like her. As she describes, the emotional impact of being a victim of implicit bias is traumatizing, and it alters her perception of herself and of the world around her. Similarly, for victims of prejudice today, including people of color, experiencing even subtle social injustices can be extremely disheartening. And now, an excerpt from Never Let Me Go. Thinking back now, I can see we were just at that age when we knew a few things about ourselves. About who we were, how we were different from our guardians, from the people outside, but hadn't yet understood what any of it meant. I'm sure somewhere in your childhood, you too had an experience like ours that day. Similar, if not in the actual details, then inside, in the feelings. Because it doesn't really matter how well your guardians try to prepare you. All the talks, videos, discussions, warnings, none of that can really bring it home. Not when you're 8 years old. And you're all together in a place like Hailsham. When you've got guardians like the ones we had. When the gardeners and the delivery men joke and laugh with you and call you sweetheart. All the same, some of it must go in somewhere. It must go in, because by the time a moment like that comes along, there's a part of you that's been waiting. Maybe from as early as when you're 5 or 6, there's been a whisper going at the back of your head saying, one day, maybe not so long from now, you'll get to know how it feels. So you're waiting, even if you don't quite know it's waiting for the moment when you realize that you really are different to them. That there are people out there like Madame who don't hate you or wish you any harm, but who nevertheless shudder at the very thought of you, of how you were brought into this world and why, and who dread the idea of your hand brushing against theirs. The first time you glimpse yourself through the eyes of a person like that, it's a cold moment. It's like walking past the mirror you've walked past every day of your life, and suddenly it shows you something else, something troubling and strange. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jack Trapanik, and today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Socrates' Apologia. In 399 BCE, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates was charged with corrupting the youth of Athens and not believing in their gods, due to his incessant questioning of the Athenian public, ever challenging people to explain why they did the things they did. In this speech, Socrates responds to his guilty verdict and his sentence, the death penalty, making peace with his fate and recommitting himself to the pursuit of knowledge and virtue. And now, the Apologia. Someone will say, yes, Socrates, but cannot you hold your tongue? And then you may go into a foreign city, and no one will interfere with you. Now, I have great difficulty in making you understand my answer to this. For you will not believe I am serious if I tell you that the greatest good of man is daily to converse about virtue, and that the life which is unexamined is not worth living. And yet what I say is true. Moreover, I am not accustomed to think I deserve any punishment. Had I money, I might have proposed to give you what I had, and been none the worse. But you see that I have none. Me you have killed because you wanted to escape the accuser, and not to give an account of your lives. But you are mistaken. That is not a way of escape, either possible or honorable. The easiest and noblest way is not to be crushing others, but to be uplifting yourselves. Wherefore, O judges, be of good cheer about death, and know this of a truth, that no evil can happen to a good man, in life or after death. He and his are not neglected by the gods, nor has my own approaching end happened by mere chance. But I see that to die and be released was better for me, for which reason also I am not angry with my accusers. They have done me no harm, although none of them meant to do me any good, and for that I may gently blame them. Still, I have a favor to ask of them. When my sons are grown, I would ask you, O my friends, to trouble them as I have troubled you, if they seem to care about riches or anything more than about virtue, or if they pretend they are something when they are really nothing, then reprove them, as I have reproved you for not caring about that for which they ought to care. If you do this, I and my sons will have received justice at your hands. The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways. I to die, and you to live. Which is better? God only knows. Thank you.
My name is Graciela Berman-Reinhardt, and I'm a senior. Today, Anthony Ray Hinton is 64 years old, but in 1985, when he was just 29, he was hauled from the streets of his hometown in Alabama and falsely identified as the murderer of 2 restaurant managers in nearby Birmingham. Then he was sentenced to death. In Hinton's 2018 memoir, The Sun Does Shine, published only 4 years after he was finally released from death row, he details the racist incarceration system that identified him as a black man and then assumed he was guilty, and describes the horrors of living on death row alongside people who had committed atrocities but who were human nonetheless. Now, an excerpt from Anthony Ray Hinton's The Sun Does Shine. There was a guy a little younger than I was in the cell below. I had never talked to him, but I knew his name was Michael Lindsay, and I knew he was the next to be executed. In the month leading up to his execution, he cried every day. He cried in the yard. He cried as the death squad practiced marching in front of his cell, and he cried when they went into the death room and turned on the generator to test Yellow Mama. The guards practiced their ritual for killing him, and then they would ask how he was doing and did he need anything, as if they weren't rehearsing his murder. He was 28 years old when the death squad came for him in May of 1989. He had no visitors in the days and hours before his death. He was completely alone. Shortly before midnight, when we knew he was being strapped into that chair, we began to make some noise. Up and down the row, men began banging on the bars and doors of their cells. I heard some men yell "murderers" to the guards. We made a noise like I had never heard before. I made a fist and I slammed it against the door of my cell as loud and as long as I could until my hand was red and raw. I didn't know Michael Lindsay, but I wanted him to know that he wasn't alone. I wanted him to know that I saw him and knew him, and his life meant something. And so did his death. I banged on the bars until the smell of Michael Lindsay's death reached me. And then I got in my bunk and I pulled the blanket over my head and I wept. I cried for a man who had to die alone. And I cried for whoever was next to die. Thank you.
From Columbine to Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. It is a tragic truth that the number of school shootings has increased in recent years. Hoping to bring awareness to this horrifying reality, student activist Austin Davis wrote words from a student in 2020. which was published in an online poetry collection, Bullets into Bells. In it, he poignantly emphasizes the beauty of life, the increasing loss of humanity, and the ever-present terror kids in this generation shouldn't be feeling. This poem, along with dozens of others, serves as a call to action to end the irreversible damage gun violence brings to America. And now I, Ruth Schifferau, will declaim words from a student. All the kids are picking flowers, but they wouldn't dare plant them. It's far too late in the day for beauty to grow from nothing. There isn't nearly enough time before the bullets will start to rain like words of hate on a swing set. And the class will have to count the holes in the wall during math. When was the last time kids were this afraid? They should be scared of failing Tuesday's spelling quiz, or waking up 5 minutes late and having to run after the bus, or running out of ink in their pens. They shouldn't be scared of getting shot up between classes. But I'd be scared as hell too if guns were as prevalent in people's hands as racist jokes were in people's mouths, as Confederate flags were on people's trucks, as thoughts and prayers were in people's minds. Look around a class of children. They've all seen the news. They've all heard their parents whispering in the refrigerator light late at night. Each student has thought about what it would feel like if one of these times their quarterly active shooter drill wasn't just pretend. If they were huddled in the closet in fear for real. Each teacher has wondered at one point or another if they might have to shed their skin and become a shield to save a child's life. A child. With a mom and dad, a child. The brother and sister, a child who walks the dog after dinner and plays with roly-polies during recess. A child with skin and blood and eyes and tears. A child who thinks about the stars. A child who likes banana popsicles even though no one else does. A child who shares her animal crackers. A child who wonders why we don't stop the car and hug homeless people. A child who gets sad sometimes. A child who likes to read under a tree by the creek. A child with a big heart, dreams, and a future.
Good morning. Today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club. Published in 1989, the novel, and later the movie, was a major breakthrough in offering a realistic depiction of the Asian American experience. And it gave hope to many for future proper representation in our literature and on our screens. However, looking back more than 3 decades later, that optimism was in vain. And the recent outrage from the Asian American community comes from a group of people tired of being erased in the media, seen as a faceless doctor or lawyer, a sexualized other, and held up as the model minority based on a false narrative that Asians are aligned with whiteness.
Today, we need to humanize the untold stories of countless first and second generation immigrants of Asian descent. And now an excerpt from the Joy Luck Club, the parable, Feathers from 1,000 Li Away. The old woman remembered a swan she had bought many years ago in Shanghai for a foolish sum. This bird, boasted the vendor, was once a duck that stretched its neck in hopes of becoming a goose. And now look, it is too beautiful to eat. Then the woman and the swan sailed across an ocean many thousands of li wide, stretching their necks toward America. On her journey, the woman cooed to the swan, "In America, I will have a daughter just like me. But over there, nobody will say her worth is measured by the loudness of her husband's belch. Over there, nobody will look down on her, because I will make her speak only perfect American English. And over there, she will always be too full to swallow any sorrow. She will know my meaning, because I will give her this swan, a creature that became more than what was hoped for." But when she arrived in the new country, the immigration officials pulled her swan away from her, leaving the woman fluttering her arms and with a single swan feather for a memory. And then she had to fill out so many forms, she forgot why she had come and what she had left behind. Now the woman was old, and she had a daughter who grew up speaking only English and who drank more Coca-Cola than sorrow. For a long time now, the woman had wanted to give her daughter the single swan feather and tell her, "This feather may look worthless, but it comes from afar and carries with it my good intentions." And she waited, year after year, for the day she could tell her daughter this in perfect American English.